now we're into the last panel session of the day. So if I press my buttons right, we should be able to move along to the final panel sponsor session or final panel sponsor pre-roll. So this is from Tag Video Systems, providing all my buttons.
Media workflow started out being fairly linear and straightforward. As OTT became a dominant form of delivery, new complexities were introduced to the workflow: formats, paths, variants, and third-party services. To ensure quality delivery in this workflow, you might need quite a few monitoring nodes. The Tag platform went through the same journey, starting as a monitoring and visualization tool for traditional delivery. As traditional delivery evolved to OTT, Tag added support of unique OTT formats and requirements. Over time, Tag added support of uncompressed signals to enable users to monitor playout and live production. Today, Tag is monitoring all formats throughout the entire media workflow, and over 70,000 probing points are actively collecting valuable data. But data is no longer good enough. You need information and insights to continuously improve your customer experience. To provide open access to the data collected across the platform and turn that data into insights, Tag developed the MCS. The MCS configures, aggregates, and manages the data. Once aggregated, the MCS exposes this data to a wide range of open source analysis and data visualization tools effortlessly. These tools analyze and visualize the data, turning it into valuable, actionable knowledge to help optimize your operation. There is no limit to the insight you can gain using the Tag real-time media platform. As more data points are monitored in more workflows, the more valuable the knowledge becomes, and it's all yours.
Okay, so we're doing quite well with regards to timing, but we have slipped a little bit. However, we're not doing too badly after 8 hours. We're just about 8 minutes behind time. So Tim, are you out there?
I am, and I will do my best to keep us back on time.
Well, it's all right. Keep it to half an hour, but we will try not to add any more minutes as we go. So over to you, Tim.
All right, thanks, Dom, and thank you to Paul, our sponsor with Tag. Paul, tell us a little bit about your time in the industry.
Oh boy, that could go a while. Been in the industry a very long time. I started on the customer side of the fence in the early 1980s, working for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and graduated out of there in the early part of the 90s. Joined a little company called Leach Technology here in Toronto. Became Harris Broadcast, and today it's called Magic Communications. And ran R&D there for a couple of decades, and then did some consulting. And then I found these little guys called Tag, and they were having some fun and doing some very cool stuff. And they said, "Hey, do you want to come and play with us?" And I said, "Hey, sure." Well, here we are.
You just took me down memory lane with Leach and Harris and Imagine, because part of my background was broadcast and building video matrices. So very nice.
There you go. Yeah.
Igor, let's have you introduce yourself and briefly about your company as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Igor Oreper. I work for a company called Bitmovin. We make a number of tools in the media space around video compression, playback, and also analytics. I've been with Bitmovin about 4 years, and prior to that was at Comcast Technology Solutions. And prior to that, PricewaterhouseCoopers, focused on media and entertainment space. Nice to be here.
Likewise. I was with EY on that media side, so I know that old PwC, Accenture, EY trifecta. And then we've got Andy Hooper with Edgeware. Andy, introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Andy. So yeah, I went through the video technology business of Motorola and Aris, and also then Edgeware. And Edgeware was a company that made pretty well-known video streaming servers, FPGA based, and that was used very widely for IPTV streaming, building private CDNs operated by network operators primarily. And before that, I was in the enterprise IT space though. So I went from software to hardware, and now we're going back to software. We're part of Agile Content, and Agile Content's acquired Edgeware. I had the platforms and product part of the business. We're kind of interesting because we have a TV operator, and our business is half about going and outsourcing TV operations or partnering with network providers who want some help or who want us to come along and actually run that part of the business for them, right from the content through to the technology platform. But also we build the platform itself, and that's the piece that I look after. And that platform is used for our own operations, and then we also license that for use by third parties as well.
So I love this panel because metadata to me is much more interesting than video, even though, you know, putting video out is hard. Analyzing video and traffic is even harder. But let's start, Andy, with you. What's the difference between sort of quality of service and quality of experience? Because we sort of use those interchangeably, but to me, there are some distinctions.
Yeah, I think it's probably for most purposes okay to interchange them. If you go back to the telco days, of course, of the ITU, there are very strict standards around all this stuff for telecoms networking. And so quality of service was very strictly defined based on network behavior parameters and characteristics. Going forwards, that's not perhaps quite so strictly defined within the video space, although, of course, there are the same kind of network measurements that you can use to actually work out what's going on. Quality of experience tends to then wrap the network behavior and the service layer within the network with a whole host of other things as well. Not least, of course, it extends to the edges, the very edge of the network, either the device on which you're consuming the video, and that's often something which is excluded from any telco network QoS calculations. And indeed, it also can incorporate lots of other aspects of the experience, such as if I think about some of the things we also spend a lot of time working on, it's how does one discover the content? What's the experience through the app before you even start streaming the video? So that's not the main focus of today, but there's a whole raft of things that you can do there to measure that experience. And then, of course, once the video starts playing, what is the delivered experience in terms of the perception of the viewer of the video on the screen? So I would say quality of experience starts to entail a whole raft of other elements outside just the network service layer as well.
Okay, fair point. Paul, anything to add to that particular sort of insight into QoE versus QoS?
Yeah, well, QoS is easy and QoE is not so easy. I mean, QoS is based much more on hard metrics, statistical analysis, actual, engineering kind of things. QoE has a huge human factor in it. And as Andy mentioned, I mean, the viewer's experience right from the menu on down becomes part of that. So what used to be, simply fine tuning your TV tuner, and that was the end of QoE, and you watched what you got. I mean, today there are parameters both within the delivery, which we're all used to, but as well that QoE that actually just lives in the provider experience of using the app, navigating the app, your zap time between channels, all these little annoying things, and they add up to the total experience, which they didn't so much before.
Yeah. So Igor, you all, as you said, sort of soup to nuts on the delivery side. What are some of the sort of key metrics that you end up being able to see as you have the broader perspective, as opposed to just owning the player or just owning the content delivery side?
Yeah, I think quality of experience is really the perspective of the user, and when you look at it from the perspective of the user, what does the user see? They see usually video playback. Maybe it's only audio, but usually it's audio and video. And how does that measure? Well, you look at video startup time. Folks are very interested in that, and it depends very much on the devices, of course. But that's usually the first measure from a user's perspective that they have of your video service. Second is seek time. If you're jumping around a bot asset or even within a live stream right up to the live point, you want that to move quickly when you're scrubbing in the video, and buffering. Right, those are kind of the key measures of the quality of experience, but also the perceptual quality. I see a lot more frequently now. Our customers are really focused on the perceived visual quality and also audio quality of the content that the users are consuming, and so they're very interested to understand at what scale are they watching, at what resolution are they watching, and of course all of that is compared to what are they capable of consuming, and is the video service providing the highest or as high enough of an experience as can be made available to a particular user.
And this is all new, right? Because there was a time not that long ago when there was one quality. it was HD. You're watching an HD channel, it's HD. If the quality was below HD, you would immediately notice, but that was really the limit of it. And now, of course, we're seeing, a span of qualities that consumers have an awareness of. And this is a whole different world now where consumers actually understand something about that quality level. And so when they buy that 8K set and screw it on the wall, people's phones are going to ring asking why it doesn't look quite so 8K-ish. And this is new now that the consumer is driving us more than the actual industry.
And Igor, I wanted to go back to a point that you had there, which is, ultimately, if we used to set it and forget it, now there's that expectation from the content owner standpoint that I know what the quality looks like when I look at it in my screening room. I know there's the possibility of delivering almost equal quality across the network. What are the things that are slowing down that quality of delivery? When I say slowing down, obviously latency is one piece, but you mentioned a couple other things there. Is it this push into HDR and 10-bit that's really forced us that direction? Or is it the fact that so many people are consuming on so many different device types that the content owner wants to make sure that it looks equal across those all those devices?
So yeah, I think it depends on the content provider, right? Why they're more interested. But I think for everyone, the answer is we have more, the video services have become more sophisticated, right? First, the goal was let's make it viewable for everyone on every platform. Well, now that's the case, and you can view it, the content on almost every platform, and that's independent of the video service you're watching as a consumer. Well, now what's the next level? The next level is now you have to optimize that experience for the given platform and content type. So for some content providers, it is HDR, right, and just a higher dynamic range of color, because that's the thing that they want to use to differentiate their service. For others, it's going to be a very low broadcast delay if you're talking about a live service, and so they want to optimize for that. And for others, it might just be fastest possible startup time for a social media network, right, where users are scrolling through video content now, where they used to scroll through images or text content. So I think the specific area of focus differs depending on the video service that is being provided. But I think what's true across the board is the level of sophistication and being able to measure and also provide an optimal consumer experience to every consumer, regardless of platform. I think that's become possible now, and so that's where everyone is focusing.
Got it. So I'm going to start this question with Andy, and I'll walk back through Paul and then come back to you, Igor, on this. But traditionally, we've sort of looked at QoE systems as being relying on what happens out at the edge where the end user is. Are there server-side data sets that we can use to actually help further enhance the QoE strategy?
Well, I suppose one of the nice things about moving from transport streams to and sort of multicast or broadcast distribution to IP is that every single request has a HTTP GET. So if you just look at the way the internet works, you need a server somewhere. And that means you can start to do a fair bit of analysis of those requests if you're in the right place and if the requests are hitting your server. So I think if you want to have a fully rounded view of the quality of experience, I mean, how a user is navigating through an app and are they finding the things that they want to find, for example? That's something that needs an analytics toolkit that's built into the app, which is reporting back that behavior, which is getting post hoc processed, right? Most of the time, that's going to be the way that works. You might be able to do with some real-time hooks into the app, but then you're starting to generate a lot of traffic. So that's one thing you could do on the client side. You also, of course, the only way to really embed a real-time video analytics toolkit into the experience is to measure that experience, is to do that in the app as well, the app on the viewing device. So that's something else that you need to do client side. But one of the downsides of the client side approach is that you could have a lot of apps that you have to keep up to date, and you have a lot of integration work that you have to do, and you can generate a lot of traffic. And the other thing is you're probably not sending all of that data back real time. So on the server side, you have a different, perhaps reduced, but much more real-time capability that you can bring to bear on what's happening from a video quality of experience perspective. So we spent a lot of time, for example, building what we call our Stream Pilot service, where we actually now have operators who are sending us their video manifests come actually via us, and then we actually get the request for the ADR video, and then we, on a redirect basis, will select which CDN we think is best placed to deliver either that session. And recently now we've started to introduce the capability to do this in the middle of the stream as well. And what does that mean? It means you can actually start to, it's kind of interesting looking at the data coming out of this platform, because you actually start to see a number of things in terms of CDN behavior, which you wouldn't be able to detect if you were measuring the post CDN delivery in the client. So we can actually start to anticipate some things that have not yet become problems. So some incipient issues, and you can have a rule set which then starts to steer the traffic in different directions as well. So I would say that if on the server side, you have a reduced data set, and it's fundamentally based on the HTTP headers you can get, and however you can correlate that with other information you may store. But that can still generate quite a rich set of information. Not least of which, of course, is the actual bit rates that are being requested, because with ADR video, different URL for different bit rates, just to give you one example. We can then start to get real-time views of, right, across all the viewers, how many are getting the worst bit rate, how many are getting the best, and who's in between, and is that different for different CDNs, for example, and then start to steer traffic appropriately. So you can do quite a lot. If it's real-time, it generally has to be server-side.
Yeah, interesting. Paul, what's your take on that, using server-side data along with sort of end user real-time measurements?
Yeah, so today we don't today look at any end user metrics or anything from the players. We're interested in delivery to the CDN and ultimately to the customer, but we stop right now at the edge in the product. But we, of course, work all the way upstream. So for us, this data exists at many points in a live production. We can be watching that right from the live control room all the way through traditional delivery, as well as OTT out to the edge. And it does produce indeed a wealth of data. And this, in the little video we kicked off with, this is what we're actually introducing now, is our ability to actually visualize the system end to end from an aggregated data point of view, and give you handles on that data. And not just summary data, but actually the entire raw data set, so you can apply visualization tools and analytics. Andy spoke about forecasting and predicting failures, or looking at increasing risk in certain situations. And I mean, that's precisely the whole idea of monitoring the system end to end, not just at the edge, but upstream of that as well. I mean, if you have trouble at the origin, well, you're going to find it across the CDN, but you need to know what's going on upstream without actually having to drive there to find out. So that's part of the tag value equation, is this end-to-end monitoring. But certainly the viewer metrics and the CDN edge metrics are vast. They're huge, and that's why we've actually introduced this system to integrate all of this data to give you a complete view of your end-to-end system, not just down at the edge.
Igor, your thoughts on this one briefly?
Yeah, I think the kind of going back to definition of quality of service, quality of experience, I think from the viewer's perspective, they're only really interested in quality of experience. They don't care about, is your CDN edge cache responding quickly enough or not. Right. But from a service provider's perspective, it is important. The quality of service metrics are really important, because oftentimes, as Andy said, they're leading indicators to potential service issues. And those leading indicators can quickly manifest themselves in quality of experience issues. And so I don't think there are great solutions out there in the market that allow you to federate quality of service and experience data in a way that can be very actionable today, especially in real-time live events, for example. But it's really important to do that. There are some services out there that allow you to do correlation of data across different data stores, and I've seen some really nice implementations where some of our customers are using the quality of experience metrics, the client side metrics, and then relating that back to quality of service metrics. So I think any opportunity that you might have as a video service provider to federate and correlate that data, I think would give you a competitive advantage to addressing quality of experience problems before they become real problems that are impacting a large number of users.
So Andy mentioned, the sort of model of a reduced amount of information at the server. Paul talked about aggregating that information together, and Igor, you talked about that some too. Two sort of semi-connected questions. One, have we changed the KPIs that we've used to measure now that we can deliver to every device? Because 5 years ago when we looked at KPIs, they were fairly limited. And then two, is there a point that we're gathering too much data? And I say that with trepidation because I love gathering as much data as I can to make a decision. But at some point, if I'm jettisoning data, maybe I don't necessarily need to use that from a QoE standpoint. So I'll open that up to all three of you.
I'm with you. I love data. And there's no reason to jettison data. There's good reason to ignore data. And we live in a time, put this a different way. If I can go back a bunch of years, there was a time when we had to curate the data we kept because of size limitations. Sure. Storage is not a problem anymore. We can keep all the data we want. And I vote for not jettisoning any data and carefully curating and using the data you need. The trick is to figure out what's amidst the noise that's of meaning to you.
Paul, I'm going to go back in my history. So I started in film production, moved into video. We would digitize into our Media 100 or our Avid everything off the Beta SP tapes. And then at the end of a project, people would say, well, let's just dump the files because we've still got the tapes. And I'm thinking, why go through that extra stage of the process again, especially because the file size will be different. Anyway, Andy, Igor.
Yes, I think an interesting anecdote when we did some market research last year. It's available on the website. You can go get that. It's kind of a little bit of a Q&A with streaming service providers about how to about what's important for them, and it was typically focused around multi-CDN and how many people are doing multi-CDN and what's important. And one of the questions was related to what if you could get all of this out of the following 15 or so pieces of data types or types of data. If you could choose three, which three would you prefer to store and analyze? And out of all the questions, it was the one that had by far the least information. It was like the spread was across everything. So of course, from a product management point of view, that was quite tricky. It was hard for us to discern where we should focus. And we kind of decided we kind of have to store everything. As Paul was saying, it's difficult to the cloud bills can become a little bit scary sometimes, but ultimately you have to store as much as possible, and then you have to have a process for going through that, for having the application of statistical methods onto that to try and find information in the noise. And we often find that there are some hidden gems in there as well that can then start to help us anticipate problems in the future. So yeah, whilst the storage availability is there, the cost is still a real thing that we have to be worried about. So that's something which has to factor into the equation at some point. But yeah, catch as much as you can, process it as quick as you can, and act upon it immediately if possible.
Interesting. Igor, your take?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, and agree with Andy and Paul in their comments. The one thing I'd add is what we've seen is changing, is that service providers are looking more about they're looking at proactive notifications, right? So it used to be that you'd collect all this data, and then at some point, maybe it was once a day, once a week, once a year, you'd go back and you do some historical analysis, and then you draw conclusions from that. And we see, there's still a use case for that, but more often now we're seeing questions are asked before the data is gathered, right? So you sort of formulate your question, you grab your favorite analytics tools or tools in many cases, and you set up alerts to tell you, when a certain condition happens, and then you act on those alerts. And so we're seeing a lot more usage of alerting, right? Identifying leading indicators that will manifest themselves in some problem, within minutes or hours, and then doing something about that, right? Actionable data that you can really leverage to ensure great user experience continues for your user population. So we see a lot of folks are using that, for example, from the Bitmovin Analytics product, and are asking us a lot of questions about, well, what can I do to sort of tailor my questions to your analytics product ahead of time?
Interesting. Well, Dom, I know we're just past the top of the hour. I'm going to turn it back to you to say thanks to each of our panelists.
Absolutely splendid panel once again. My brain is teeming with things to discuss, but let's go along the panel and say thank you. So Igor, if I could get a wave from you and a thumbs up and a thank you. Well, no, thank you from us, really. Really appreciate Bitmovin's involvement. And let me just press the right buttons. There's Andy. Give us a thumbs up and a wave. Much appreciated, Andy. It's great to see Agile on the show, and your input was invaluable. And Paul, thank you very much. What an interesting career you've had, and also thank you hugely for sponsoring the session. It's deeply appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to join you guys anytime.
Not at all. We'll see you soon. And Tim, we'll have you back for the final wrap up with myself, Mark, and Eric shortly. So,
yep.
Yeah, just got enough time to go and grab a cup of tea. So now we've done it. We've done the journey from the very seabed, through the fibers, through the peering and the transit connections, through the data centers, up into the application layer, where we've looked at video application in quite a lot of detail. We've looked at the deployment of service. We've looked at maintaining quality of service to the consumer. And really with that, we've kind of embraced the whole CDN stack. But of course, we now need to think about what comes next.